We're talking today about design and about integration. And as a child born in the 50s, when I hear that word integration, I think of the images that flooded into our black and white TV in our den at home. Images of people separating from each other, people pulling apart, struggling, and really wanting to be away from others who were somehow different. People who were different maybe in the way they spoke, in the way they dressed, in the color of their skin, or the way they thought. It was unjust, it was horrible, and we called it segregation. I have another word for it, one that, since this is really the opposite of integration, a word I think describes it, and that is disintegration. Disintegrate. Disintegrate. Look it up. It means to tear something apart, to utterly and completely destroy it. Now, we still fight against disintegration in every aspect of our lives. Why is that? I don't know. Maybe we're programmed that way. You know, maybe somewhere back in our ancient tribal past, each of our tribes felt, well, you know, we've got to protect ourselves, so we've got to push out anyone and anything that seems foreign. Or maybe it didn't have anything to do with that at all. Maybe it's just generation piled upon generation of learned bad behavior. But this disintegration is with us today, and it's not just about race. In my hometown of Los Angeles, just last month, at a Dodgers baseball game. Now this is a baseball game, right? This is where we should be going to have fun. After the game, a Dodgers fan attacked and nearly killed a visiting fan from the San Francisco Giants. This wasn't about civil rights or anything. This was about, my team superior to yours. And I'm willing to bet that if that same guy had been born in San Francisco and had come down to that game, he probably would have been attacking somebody from Los Angeles, because this wasn't about fighting for what was right or what was virtuous over against bad and evil. No, this was fighting for me and my team, my tribe, and pushing out you and yours. Now, you guys, having fun here today? It's nice, have something in common. We're all at TED. But instead, if this row of seats were at an airline waiting lounge, and this seat right here had been empty, and you would come up to it, my guess is you would have walked right by that seat, and you would have as well. And you would have walked way down here to find an empty set of seats. Why? Because we seem to have this inborn tendency to disintegrate ourselves from strangers. Now, what does all this have to do with design? Well, if you work in a company, and we pretty much all do, this tends to insinuate itself, this disintegration, in a kind of a caste-like subtle hierarchy of discrimination. I mean, if you're in a design company led by designers, there's a pretty good chance that the design people, they're kind of going to put themselves at the head of the pack. And the engineers and the business people, they'll be pushed into the second tier. Or maybe you work in a company that is really run by the folks in business. And in that case, it's going to be the business people that are out front, and there will be this tier-like discrimination against the designers and against the technical staff. And if you don't think this happens in your company, I'll tell you what, next time you walk by the door to the lunchroom, stick your head around and peek in and see if you don't notice this self-segregation of people into the groups that they're familiar with. In fact, all that's really missing at the tables is the signage. And then when you step back out of that and you're in your hallway in your company and you're thinking about how's my company set up, the departments and the divisions, see if you can't really sense that there's a discrimination there too. I mean, almost as though there were signs of who's welcome this way and who's not, who's only welcome over there. Now, how can we stimulate creative integration to counteract this? Well, I think there are three spheres in our lives where we can attack this. One is the place that we work at. The other is the people themselves, and that includes ourselves. And the third is the product or the service that we're seeking to create. Now, when I founded WET, I did it with a handful of friends, and we were all designers. I mean, oh my gosh, we were passionate about design. We lived and breathed it. And in fact, I remember getting a phone call from a friend when we started the company, and he said, "Well, Mark, aren't you going to bring in some other folks? I mean, some people that maybe know something about manufacturing. Don't you want to build what you're dreaming of and designing?" And I actually said to him on the phone, "That sounds so impure." We really have this vision. And so we executed the first couple of our projects. Well, what we found was that there was a huge gap between the vision that we'd started out with and what we actually ended up with. So, actually, sort of begrudgingly at first, we started to bring some other folks with other talents in to join us. I mean, some engineers, some product development people, and finally manufacturing. And so actually today at WET, we have a full spectrum of all these different interests and people. And by that I don't mean just a little lineup, of departments in serial order that the work flows through. No, I mean when we hire somebody new to come and join us and be a conceptualizer, we take that person on their first day and we take them down and we plunk them into manufacturing and we say, "You're going to spend time here." And I don't mean just watching the machines. I mean, you're going to work here and learn how to run these machines. And then we take some of the folks from manufacturing, sometimes this is a poll, and we take them up and we put them into the conceptualizing area and we say, "You're going to eat with these people, you're going to sketch with them, you're going to brainstorm with them, and you're going to really integrate with them." And by doing that, we've created this whole integrated spectrum of interests and people that we're all very fluidly familiar with each other. Now, the funny thing is, we actually got a free gift out of this because think about it. If you only go so far in the process and then you say, "Well, this is where we're going to stop," we'll hand it over to the other tribes, to somebody else outside of our group to finish that. Well, to accomplish that handover, we end up building walls. We build walls out of bricks called contracts, called performance specifications, because, oh my gosh, we don't want to get here and find out that what we've devised so far is going to get messed up by those people, so we better really memorialize that. And we want to make sure that they don't trick us by what they end up delivering. Well, if instead of that, if we can take these folks out there and we can bring them up over that wall and we can make them part of our integrated creative family, then all that time and wasted energy that went into building those barriers is now recaptured, and we can use it to continue on in our integrating process. When we built our newest building at WET, I thought, what would be cool? It would be so cool if we had live music in here. So I went out and got a piano, and first instinct might have been to put it in the design group. But no, I put it right in the middle of the process with the engineers. And about 2 weeks later, somebody came up to me and said, "Mark, I've got an old set of drums at home. Is it okay if I bring those in?" And now, if you come in to see us, what you see is at any given time, you're likely to encounter a group there jamming away, and it'll be somebody from assembly, and somebody from the model shop, and somebody from the custodial staff, all together because we have this integrated environment. And what I'd like to do now is invite you to take a 60-second high-speed chase through our environment at WET. We're a work in progress, but come and join me for this. Now, the second, and to me in many ways the most interesting place to integrate is within people, integrate within one single person themselves. My colleague at Stanford, David Kelly, who went on to found IDEO, David says that when a company starts out to create something new, they typically, they'll hire a design consultancy from some town over here. They'll select an engineering consultancy here, and then they'll decide, well, we'll have this thing built maybe in China. And David says, if that can all be integrated together into one town, or even into one company doing all of that, or better yet, into one floor, or let's say if we can co-locate all of those disciplines into one team, it's a huge step forward in innovation. But if we can actually co-locate all of those different interests and disciplines, not just into a team, but inside of one human head, then that's where the magic can really happen. Now you might be saying, well, that sounds crazy. I can assure you it's not crazy, nor is it new. I mean, think for a minute of Leonardo da Vinci, of Michelangelo. Think of Gustav Eiffel. Think of Steve Jobs. Michelangelo didn't start as a tiny child aspiring to be a sculptor. He started actually playing in the stone yards and tool shops. And Steve Jobs says that one of the most formative parts of his entire life was the time that he spent in India studying Buddhism. And he says that one of the most instrumental college classes he took leading up to the evolution of the Mac was not a computer class, but a class in calligraphy. Each of these individuals integrated into themselves this wide diversity of interests and talents in things like science, shops, and art. Now, if you were to look at my personal college resume, you'd probably say, well, that Mark Fuller guy, he must be kind of slow. It took him 5.5 years to finish a simple 4-year engineering degree, and it did. And it took me 2 years to finish a 1-year master's program. But the reason for that is I spent all that extra time studying completely irrelevant stuff. I mean, I took dance classes, I studied architecture, I studied theatrical makeup, optics, electronics, set design. But I can assure you that every one of those specific things in the years since has at some point or another popped up and informed some project or something that I was working on. And I didn't do it just so that I thought, wow, I want to do everything myself. No, not at all. I did it so that I could understand and appreciate and respect all of the other disciplines that the people that I would be integrating with and working with would be creating. Now, we decided a couple of years ago at WET that it would be a challenge for us to design a playground for kids where they could integrate things into their play experiences. And so we build a playground, and it's a pretty cool one. The kids can dig down in the sand and make all sorts of tunnels, and then they can get on teeter-totters that pump water, and they can get on bicycles that not only pump water but display what's happening in all these transparent hydraulics. And then we designed for them a whole series of scalene triangles. You remember geometry scaling? That means all the 3 sides are different. And the kids can stack them up and just kind of get a gut level feel for geometry. And as you watch this next video of these kids, I want you to ask yourself something. As you look at them, say, are these kids going to grow up to be designers? Are they going to grow up to be engineers? Or are they going to grow up to be something that we don't yet even have a word for? These are prototype people. These are little living mock-ups who are integrating every experience that they're having into their future lives.
Crazy, I say, born rich, stay rich, there's no point taking chances. in me. I wouldn't call it sophomore slump. I'd say one step close to being just where I want to be. Away from the city. Away from this machine. Alright, meet me in the middle. Well, come on, let's make up a dance. And we'll agree to call it the compromise. There's no sense in complaining. It doesn't change our minds. Take me by the hand, let's compromise.
Now, how do we integrate the product itself? Well, I don't think there's a better example we could find than to look at nature. My son, Harrison, he's in 5th grade now, and he came home a couple of months ago and he said, "Daddy, we're studying chemistry." "Really? What are you learning?" "Well, today we learned that there's 2 different ways you can combine stuff." "What are they?" Well, one's a mixture, you know, and you take 2 things and you put them together and you mix them up. And in fact, the teacher gave us some Rice Krispies and some iron filings, and we put them together and we mixed them and we stirred them and stirred them and stirred them. And then she gave us a magnet, and we put the magnet in, and it was so easy to separate the iron filings back out. Well, what's the other way? Dad, the other way is so cool. It's called creating a compound. And it's like magic, Dad, because you take 2 things and you put them together, and what you get isn't anything like either of the 2 things you started with. It's just like magic. It's sort of like if you take 2 gases, let's say oxygen and hydrogen, and you combine them into a compound, you don't get a 3rd gas. You get that marvelous liquid that sustains all of human life. You get water. And we as designers, we must challenge ourselves to create compounds, not mixtures. We can no longer afford to take 2 things and stick them together and put a little Bondo in the seam and sand it down and say, we've created an integrated product here. We have to create something that's new, something so that the question about what's the software and what's the hardware, those questions don't even make sense. That water that we just created, that is something that I play with all the time. And, well, in trying to think how maybe we can use water to demonstrate integration, what's the most opposite thing in the world we can think of from water? I'd have to say that's fire. I mean, water, fire, they've been arch enemies since the 2nd day of creation, right? I mean, fire boils away water, water snuffs the life out of fire. So let's see if we can integrate them. Remember what I said about changing properties? I wouldn't have done that if that was just a column of fire. Now, as you look at this, I want you to think of just one thing. We've all seen, all of us, we've all seen water and fire a gazillion times, right? I mean, every single day of our lives. In fact, we've seen them so much that when we look at them, we don't really even see them anymore. But I'm betting that when you see this here, you're seeing that water and that fire as though it were for the first time, as though it were through the eyes of a child. If we can learn to transform our instincts so that we seek, not avoid, that which is strange and opposite, if we can learn to crave differences, not fear them, if we can integrate at the smallest level with everything and every thought in every aspect of our lives, if we can infuse our spirits with integration in the same way that that fire infused that water, then the world will know no limits to the magic that we can produce. Thank you.